Everybody, welcome to episode 166 of Fight Chat Friday. So as you can see from that intro, we have a lot of action in this fight here in the minus 55 division from the Worlds. So we have Labrie from Germany fighting for Sanchis from Argentina. So two of these girls have been on the scene for a while now, and they are well known on the circuit. So we expect this to be a good match. From what we've seen on the stats for this one, there's a lot of action, so we'll get through it and get stuck into it. And there's a lot of talking points from this one, Adrian.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get stuck into it straight away, and we can see even from the initial postures, a proposed difference in style from the two fighters. Ira, as we'd expect from seeing her in many competitions, very capable with the front leg, high lift, high carry, and definitely looks to put pressure on with that. Sanchis tends to be a little bit more of a circular fighter, looks to push and pull and engage with the hands predominantly, a little bit more of a counter style fighter.
Yeah, interesting that you said that the starting postures from both fighters kind of tells that story too, with Fair using the high guard from wacko point fighting almost to cover the high kicks.
Yeah.
But so far we see this fight is kind of starting out with the lead leg carry, and I'm actually very impressed with Yera's ability to use that effectively, not just using the leg and just throwing it in the air without any efficiency behind it. She actually uses it really well to dictate some space, which isn't something that we see too often in the female divisions from the couple of fights we've looked at so far.
I think that's the distinction that's good to make there. Very often the initial lift is on the spot with a lot of the female divisions, and then the carry happens afterwards with the hop, where I think Ira gets that high chamber and is immediately putting on pressure. Interesting on this one that I see that Sanchis got the score even though the warning was given for pushing, but it did turn up on the board, so maybe a little bit of an error on that front.
Also similar with another spinning shot that we see in this fight as well, where the glove actually touches the floor, and we think it does get a score. But here is a little change of tactics here from Sanchis, which is good because she now realizes she's having more success when she gets the hand. Here's the spin where she gets to the ground. I don't know if this one scored. Maybe it was the earlier one.
I think the earlier one got the score.
Yeah. But we see that this is now playing out as the pattern, a front leg carry, no real hands yet from Yera. So we actually see that in the stats later on. She didn't throw too many hands at all. So she's using her front leg as her main weapon and actually using it really well. So we always talk about the triad of ring position, distance control, and also tempo control. And for me, she controls all three. For most of this fight, particularly in this first round, we see Sanchis is trying to get through a couple of times to just break that distance and get a little bit closer, but the distance control is just so sharp from Yera that she's able to use her defensive sidekick really well, like we see here.
Yeah, I just want to bring back to that one because it's quite an unusual entry. Sanchis almost running on a curve to get in around the back of the sidekick, and a very unusual thing to attempt. It's it's something that you wouldn't kind of think of to try. So rather than trying to beat the tempo of the lifting leg, instead trying to create a curve around the heel to find a way through to hands. Reasonably effective.
Yeah, so we see starting off round two here, we have 5 warnings for Sanchis, which isn't a great place to be, especially considering that this match is quite close in terms of the scores here, you can see in the bottom right. So now we have control from Yera. She's kind of using that front leg really well and controlling the distance. So now it's up to Sanchis to really figure out this problem with the last remaining 90 seconds. And so far, she's not really posing many threats with that front leg carry. I'd like to see her use that effectively a bit more. We'll see where she does use this later on, but it's a bit too late by that time.
Yeah, or potentially following that front leg in. So looking to see, can she cover a little bit of distance with her own front leg, rather than, like in this case, pushing the blitz from such a long distance. Because Ira's most effective tool, and we'll talk about this later, has been that defensive sidekick. And to make that effective, the best thing you could offer your opponent is to start from a little bit too far away and give them a chance to read your movement.
Yeah, and look, if your biggest weapon and scoring shot is a defensive sidekick, leading 4-0 is a great place to be because they have to now come to you, which is a recipe for success for Yera. So she can just bring this on. But here we see actually a great opportunity for Sanchis getting through, using that front leg carry to get closer. And while she was on the edge of the ring, then was able to drive her out with the blitz. So that was one of the first times we really see that being effective. So that was a method that she could have used a bit more often to get some success, I think.
the 6th warning there, just bringing things back a little bit in the other direction. We're seeing those 3 blue cards. So last 30 seconds at this stage, Ira's put herself back into the middle of the ring, looking to set up a steady state. So she's looking to preserve the game state in the last 30 seconds of this match. She wants the match to continue to be about Sanchis having to find a way around her front leg and drawing her in onto that range for potentially that defensive side kick or the little flick to the head if that becomes available. Sanchis now having to be a bit more creative and having to work an awful lot harder to find a way around that front leg.
Yeah, and that front leg always having a nice threat. Maybe it's the body like we just seen there, maybe it's the head. But I think really, really controlled, let's call it like a measured professional performance from Ira. Really, really effective. She didn't really come out of her game plan too much. She knew what she wanted to do, and she was very, very successful in getting that across then.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it does come back to, we often have that analogy that, if you're a puncher, you can't afford to be outworked. And when we look at, as we jump straight into the visuals, the work rate between both fighters, we can see they're very, very, very similar. And where Sanchis is looking to do the majority of her scoring from hands, she really would have to have a higher work rate, especially when we look at those attempts to go to hands. And it's not as high as it would need to be to get around the fact that Ira has the kind of more direct, simple, positional shot. Like, she's playing the percentages, and Sanchis is looking to almost break the percentage game by getting past that leg and setting up scores. And again, she has to be super effective in terms of when she does get to hands, she has to find that bonus shot at the end and maximize her scores. And I think that's maybe where things have fallen apart or gone off the rails for her in this one.
Yeah, we see like the carry was almost similar for both girls here, but Sanchez didn't use it as effectively from what we can tell by the contacts. Now, she did use it one stage to get the hands really well, so you would like to see a little bit more of that. But then on the flip side, we see the side kick is really effective. So obviously that's playing into the mind. If you're after running into a few defensive side kicks once or twice, then you're a little bit apprehensive and you have to be a little bit more cautious of how you enter into that contact.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at the next one, and we'll take in the raw numbers on the contacts.
Yeah, so here the numbers are quite similar on the attempts. So you can see 57 to 56, pretty much identical, but a little bit more accurate for Ira. She was able to get a little bit more value for that, and you see the return of 52% as opposed to 33%. So we see from the last couple of fights, this is a good place to be, 52%, and that's a very busy fight, one action every 4.5 seconds essentially for both girls. Warnings obviously is a big factor here, with 2 points taken away from Sanchez's score, and we see that average score of restarts, the 12 to 13 mark, coming through once again.
Absolutely, but we're seeing, I suppose, the tail of the tape is both have about the same amount of activity. It's just that the efficiency of the shots is a little bit different. As we go on to this last table of stats, we can see that the Ira finished with an average score across the flags of 5.25 to for Sanchis is 1.5, 3.5 if you take out the warnings, and of course the conceded is the reverse of that score. The safety margin 1.75 without the warnings in play, but we can see as we look at the cards, there was 2 of those cards that were not contested in either direction. It wasn't going to make any difference, so it becomes quite a big thing. You had an interesting observation though. When we were looking at what was scoring, we found this match to be quite interesting because, obviously we're sitting at one camera angle and looking at what the judges were scoring. It felt like an unusual one, and Sanchis got 2 of her scores off of or 2 of the scores that were scored by at least one judge were for the Bandedolio Chagis, and then we had a turning kick also scored by again one of the judges. One blitz scored by I think 3 or 4 of the judges, where almost all of the scoring for Ira came from that defensive side kick. Yeah,
so when we go back and we look at that, so that technique that's in brackets there, defensive side kick and band-aid, that was their most scored technique when we actually look at the scores being flipped over. And what we actually seen was Ira was able to score on multiple judges every time. So she had 3 judges, 4 judges, 1 judge, 3 judges. So like that's a really, really good return. Whereas the 2 band-aids for Sanchez were only on 1 judge's scorecard, which isn't really a big factor. And of course, if you're losing two 2 points from your warnings there with the 7 in total. That's on all 4. So you have to remember how important that is. So we see there's a little bit more efficiency with the techniques from Yera. She was just a little bit clinical, a little bit more clear with the shots. And that was just the difference, really. But that actually then comes back to another factor. If we look at this average flag score here of 5.25, and then you take away the warnings, you say, oh, that was actually really close if the warnings weren't a factor. But then when we look down at the bottom of the screen, flags in play 2, even with the warnings, are still only 2 in play. So that's a very big factor there. We're looking to win the game here, not get the most points, essentially, because if you get 50 points on one score, it doesn't really matter. You need to win the judges' flags to get that victory.
Yeah, and just to bring in, this is the final scoreboard, just so we can see that there. You can see that the scores, particularly those first 2 scorecards, aren't impacted in any way, shape or form by the first 3 aren't really impacted in any way, shape or form by those warnings. It's not going to make any difference to how the score goes. The warnings would bring the final scorecard to a draw. So, taking the warnings away in this one instance brings it to 3-1-0 rather than it doesn't have any major impact on the overall outcome. And I think, like you said, Richie, the fact that the primary score, the only score that Sanchis got that was given on the majority of the scorecards, or 3 of the scorecards, was the punch on one of the blitzes. The other scores being, unfortunately, reverse turning kicks heading into corners, only available to be seen on one side. It's a tough thing. And the turning kick as a sneaky one under the leg, again, only one judge probably seeing that one. It's unfortunate. Whereas that defensive side kick was very, very, very clear. You find that extended position. You can see the long leg against the hip or against the body, and it makes it easy for 2 or 3 judges to see that technique.
Yeah, when we talked about that triad earlier of particularly the ring position and the distance, because they were controlled really well by Yera, that actually forced that to be a factor then as well, that Sanchis needed to get scores in corners more often because of those 2 factors, and then it's harder for you to get the good return on those. So, I have to say, I was really, really impressed with her ability to control the front leg carry and use it effectively. It's something that we've only really seen so far from maybe 2 or 3 girls from the World Championships that we've seen. A lot of them use that leg and just carry with no real intent behind that front leg carry. Just lift it, maybe take a little bit of space back here and there, and also just as a reactionary tool. So really, really effective, I think, from there, and that was a big method of victory for her.
Absolutely. So, folks, as always, if you have a fight you'd like us to look into, particularly in this division, over the next weeks we might look at another 1 or 2 of the matches out of this minus 55 kilo senior female division. We know there's a few good fighters in there, and we definitely want to showcase them as best we possibly can. Let us know your thoughts, let us know who you want to see, and we'll try and target that over the next week or 2 for you.
All right, catch you in the next one.
Bye now.